Hi there guys, how's it going? It's me, Adam, here for another video, and in this video, if you haven't seen by the icon image or the image that's just over here, we're getting into our first look at Innistrad Midnight Hunt cards. And there are quite a few cool cards in this set that I'm actually hyped for. I didn't think I would be very hyped for this set because I thought, oh, it's going to be a bunch of werewolves and whatever. So I was like, doesn't sound great. But yeah, today we're going to start looking at some of the legendary cards from the set. And as I always say, I think this is a great space to start when you're actually like on your commander journey. Like if you're going, okay, well, if I'm going to pick up cards from this set and build a commander deck around one of these legends, what can I expect to try to build around, and what can I try to do with some of these things? It's obviously a werewolf commander, which we'll get to in just a minute or two. But there certainly are some other cards that are in this set as well. Besides, we're getting more of these videos coming up. And I just want to mention very quickly that I am, at least here on the channel, moving to this sort of style of format of producing or presenting these, preview videos. And I'm also actually putting these videos as a podcast. So these episodes will be available on the podcast. So you guys, if you are listening on the podcast, and guys, if you're watching on the YouTube, the main reason why I sort of will read cards and explain what they do and why they do what they do in a very specific way as I do is because these episodes will be uploaded to the podcast, and of course when you're on the podcast you can't read the cards that are, in front of you on the screen as they are here. So it's much easier just for people who listen to the podcast, because there's heaps of people that listen to the podcast, and I want to actually drive those people over here to the YouTube because there's so many people listening to the podcast. So I hope that can happen with bringing some more content like this. So anyway, we'll get right into it because there's so many legends in this set that I think are sweet and I want to get to. So let's start having a look at Innistrad Midnight Hunt cards, and it won't be too long so we're looking at Crimson Vow either too, so we better get into it.
By the way, we make lots of great content here on the channel, and if you haven't already, please think about subscribing to the channel. It really helps out the channel grow and make more great content for you. And as our analytics show, 95.6% of people aren't subscribed to the channel. So if you aren't subscribed to the channel, do please think about subscribing to the channel. Alright, so first off, we've got this new mono white commander, 3 mana commander with vigilance, Ardeen Resplendent Cathar. Its power is equal to the number of creatures you control, and it has 4 toughness. Whenever you attack, for each opponent, you create a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking that player or a planeswalker that they control. I don't know. As mostly we're looking at these as commanders, like 98% or whatever. So first off, I'm just looking at this as a commander, and then I'm going to look at it as, if it would go in the 99 of any deck. It's kind of a Brimaz effect, and, Brimaz is kind of played a little bit. Getting those free tokens, essentially, that are attacking each opponent and whatnot, it's actually okay. It's not one of the greatest things to be doing in the game, in the world, but I like attacking myself. And I do like me some tokens, and I like to get free tokens when I attack, so maybe this will find its way into some of my decks. But as a commander, I just don't know. I think it's kind of cool, but the problem kind of is I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it's got enough going on for it to me to be like, if I pulled this out of the pack and be like, okay, cool, I've pulled this thing out of the pack. Wow, how good is it? Oh, it's a 3-mana star 4. It doesn't seem that exciting. It seems like okay value. That's the thing. It's just not like, and even the value you're getting is not huge. Like, again, I get it. It's one of those things. But again, like, I like this card, to be honest. But the thing is, it just doesn't seem like it's going to do much. So obviously, it's a more fair card, which is just fine. Again, it's one of those things. But if this thing made like lifelinkers, even that or something like that gave you lifelinking power, it's nice that it has vigilance, but or if the tokens had vigilance or something like that, just a little bit more. I don't know. I guess it's another one of those things. I'm looking at this from a commander's perspective, and a lot of these cards were made for standard or made for the draft environment or whatever, these sorts of things. So it's hard to, say it is probably better than Brimaz, but does it go in the Brimaz deck? I think if this is better than Brimaz, Brimaz goes in this deck, doesn't it? I don't know even whether Brimaz is legendary. Can't even remember. I think he is actually, but a better Brimaz, just fine. But like it is fine. There's that inkling making bird that whenever you attack one of your opponents, or whenever someone attacks one of your opponents, they get a 2/1 inkling. That one's pretty good too. So maybe there's just more of this Brimaz sort of I attack you sort of like aggro sort of strategy that you could go down. There is some cards that would be quite good with this if you would build it as a commander, like the Mentor of the Meek and cards like that, because you're making all these 1/1s a lot of the time with this and Brimaz and other cards that are like that. Whatever the mono white cat guy is, there's a bunch of these guys that when they attack they make cats and whatnot, things like that. You could have some other human or soldier, whatever sub themes if you really want, because it is human, it makes humans. But I'm not super hot on it. It's fine. It's one of those cards that I think some people might fiddle around with. But again, like if someone wants to take the challenge of building mono white, I might want to take this challenge maybe. But again, it's just not the most flashy card. So it's one of those cards I think a lot of people will skip over, and it might not get built very much. So that's my sad feeling about that. So hopefully some people will pick it up, because it does seem pretty cool, at least to me, to like even again just in some sort of token deck or in some sort of deck where you're attacking people and you want to get extra value off your attackers. It's a pity this isn't green or red actually, because we just got that new commander. Whenever you attack, you double the attack triggers of your creatures. So if this was either red or green, we'd just like be going to town with this thing. If there was another commander that kind of did the same thing, increased your attacks triggers, then this would go in that. But no, there's nothing like that with white. So with Monday maybe, but a lot of the creatures that I'm going to look through here today, I noticed that most of them have small toughness, and I think this is one of the ones that has the most toughness, so it's a bit weird, but whatever. Next, Denic Pilus Apprentice, 2-mana, 2/3 with lifelink. Cards in graveyards can't be targets of spells or abilities. Okay, weird. But then he flips for that Disentomb effect that he has, which is 2 and 2 blue. You get a 3/2 flyer. Whenever one or more creature cards are put into graveyards from anywhere, investigate. It only triggers once each turn. If he's put into the graveyard from anywhere, exile him instead. It's again a very odd commander. Like that's where I'm looking at it for first off. Like I'm not just going, oh well, it's a weird commander. Let's move on to, what else could you do with it? Like cards and spells can't be like, it's a weird hoser, I guess. Like if you want to play the blue-white control deck again, then this might be an okay commander. But again, is it any better than any of the other blue-white commanders that are taxing or controlling or whatever? It has lifelink, that's fine. It really doesn't do very much, just stops your opponents from doing anything with their graveyards, which is kind of annoying, but that's about it. So then you want to flip it, and then you want to put. It seems like it wants you to be milling, maybe? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's just very weird. The backside of this, do you like? Are you just running some blue-white control deck where you're constantly killing your opponent's stuff just to like investigate? I don't know. This it's kind of open-ended, which is kind of nice for some people, I guess. But to me, I really want my card to tell me what to do with it. I don't want to try to go, well, I could do this with it or I could do that with it. It's too open-ended for me to be like, what could I do with this? Maybe it's a mill commander, maybe, I don't know. It's sort of hard to tell because if you have like Teferi's Tutelage, which is one of the better cards that can work with this, then you pay 2 to draw, and then when you draw, you get to mill, and then you get a clue, and then you can pay 2 to draw, and you can keep repeating that process and whatnot. But it's got to be on this back side. So you've got to get it in your graveyard somehow. I don't know how you can do that because most people, again, will play Swords and Plowshares and cards like that to exile your commander more than they'll play cards to kill your commander and things like that. So, sometimes your commander gets caught in the board wipe, but it's hard to get this. That's the thing. Like, how can you get this thing either, like, into your graveyard consistently to get the backside? That's just the thing. Like, I don't understand how you're going to really do that if this is your commander. It doesn't seem like it's blue-white doesn't have that many discard effects. It does have some, but not a lot. But then you've got to get your commander in your hand. There's only a couple of ways to do that. So it's just so hard for me to imagine this being like an amazing commander that you just like, oh wow, I get it in the graveyard all the time and I bring it back and whatnot, and then I cast it from the command zone, or I get it back from the command zone, and then I get it back from the graveyard and all this other stuff. I'll put it back in the graveyard and then I get it back and all this stuff. It just seemed like the fact that you can like disentomb it every time for 4 is fine because it does get around the command attacks kind of, and you're getting a bigger, better, more evasive body on the backside, and it does a lot more stuff for you when you actually have this backside rather than having its front side. So if you can find ways to like figure all that stuff out, great. That seems like a fine commander that you can just like, okay, I get it into my graveyard somehow, and I can bring it back, and then I can, mill people, or I can do some other stuff. I can, you don't have to do one strategic thing, but to me, I think you mostly want to be one thing or another. So you mostly want to be mill, or you mostly want to be like it may be self-mill, I don't know. Like, to me, that does sound great, but maybe there's a way, and maybe enough cards in blue-white that you could use that are reanimatey and whatnot. I don't know whether there is, probably not, but there might be enough. I don't know, but I think as a win con, mill has gotten a lot better. We've got the new Brewvac and whatnot, so maybe that goes in this deck. So I would think you want to build it mostly as a mill deck so that you can get advantage of, slowing your opponents down and then continue to mill them and things like that with Teferi's Tutelage. So that's where I see it. I don't really see it like going in many other decks. Maybe if you want to just run all the troll cards that say you can't do stuff in another blue-white deck, it could go in another blue-white deck where you're just running all the control cards. But it's not that major of a card. It doesn't come down and really do very much. It stops other people from doing stuff. That's about it. So I just don't know. I don't see it like any real deck really wanting it other than just like control decks. So, and there's not that many control decks because, again, it's just not that fun of a strategy, really, in Commander, I don't find. So we'll move on. Floridan Volden Scion, or Scion. 3 mana, 3/3. We're getting like a lot of these 3 mana 3/3s or 3/2s and whatnot. Today, I think, mostly, or 2/3s and whatnot. First strike, it's a Vampire Noble. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the total life your opponents have lost this turn. Exile one of those cards, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You may play the exile card this turn. So it's kind of Phyrexian Arena, but actually you get the first card of the turn, as long as you've dealt damage or you've made your opponents lose life, once you put this onto the battlefield. The problem with this card is, to me, it's too small to really get, in there for combat very easily. There might be some equipment that you could run into this deck. I don't think this is a real Voltron deck, but maybe you could build it Voltron. I don't really think it is, though, because you want a lot of maybe very evasive, sort of threatening creatures that you can just, like, ping your opponents or whatnot. Maybe some of the actual pingers in Magic would be good too, because then you can just ping your opponents without having to attack, which isn't too bad either. And then you just get to scry 3 essentially and look for a card and then exile it and get to cast it. Scry 3, draw 1 is not to draw one of them or whatever isn't too bad. Every turn, like, if you can get that going, like, that seems like a cool commander. Like, if you can protect this, like, you can put the Swiftfoot boots on it so no one can target it. If you put stuff on it to keep it protected and not let it die, and you can keep pinging your opponents or getting, chip damage in on your opponents with evasive threats and things like this. It's kind of like, not rogues, about to say rogues. It's like ninjutsu, kind of like the ninjutsu commander, where you're just going to run a lot of these small creatures that have, like, evasion and whatnot, and just can get in there, or just, like, very recursive threats that do have some, like, evasion and whatnot and things like that, because there are a few, especially in black. But yeah, like, there's a few that you could run. And yeah, you just, like, keep pinging your opponents and hitting your opponents with evasive stuff every turn, and then be like, oh, okay, cool, I get to scry 3, draw 1, essentially every turn, which is darn good. It's way better than Phyrexian Arena in the deck that it'd be good in, or as its own command or whatever. In a deck that you could put it in, that's tough. There's a few baby decks that you can put it in, but it is each opponent. So it doesn't really benefit some of, like, the Timna, the Weaver sort of style decks that much, where you just attack one person. But, scry 1, draw it, I guess. I don't know, because you're already drawing 1 anyway, I guess, or whatever. So, or whatever. You reveal it, or whatever. You look at it, whatever it is, whatever it does. So, yeah, it's one of those things where it's just like, sure, it does have first strike, so it might do something against certain creatures, but there's just so many 4, 5, and 6, 7, and 8 power creatures even, that just, like, body this thing. So I just don't see it getting in there. You really need other things to get in there, in my opinion. Maybe there's some, like, expel drain life spells that you could run in this, which wouldn't be too bad, because, again, you just, like, it is life they've lost, which is damage as well. So it doesn't really matter which way you go about this, really. You could run some of those, each player gets dealt so much damage, burn spells. It is your post-combat main phase, so you can't really do it with, like, some of the Punisher style effects that happen on opponents' turns. You really need to have it happening on your turn, so there are some hoops to jump through with that, but that's fine. I think this is a cool commander. As I said, I think it's probably mostly the head of its own deck, where you're just, like, running all these evasive creatures. I don't really think, like, it is a vampire, So maybe it goes in the vampire deck, like Edgar Markov or whatnot, but other than that, I really can't see a really great home for it. Otherwise, it's just one of those cards where it's like, well, it does its own thing. Alright, next, Giza, Glorious Resurrector, a 4-mana 4/4. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. At the beginning of your upkeep, put all creature cards exiled with Giza onto the battlefield under your control. They gain Decay. Now, Decay is the new mechanic, so basically the creatures can't block, but and also when they attack, they die. So it's one of those things. It's just like incidental graveyard hate, but it's also basically just Tergriding your opponents. So it's another way to Tergrid everyone. It's fixed Tergrid because it isn't discard and whatnot. It is graveyard hate, which is kind of nice as well. It is also kind of nice to a degree that you only get these things for one turn, essentially, to a degree, because again, that's the one real big problem with a lot of the Tergrid decks, is that just like, oh cool, the game's over because no one could answer Tergrid. Okay, cool, well, no one else gets to play. Or, one of those things where it's just such a big target because it's Tergrid and everyone knows the play pattern of like, okay, no one was able to kill it, that's it, game's over. Shuffle up and play another one, because you're not getting out of this. So everyone's just like, kill it, and then Tergrid players just like, oh great, I never get to do anything, and my commander gets killed all the goddamn time because it's too good. It does seem pretty darn good, but again, you only get the creatures for one turn. Again, you do get to exile them, which means they're not coming back. But you do get that advantage at least for that one thing. Or maybe you can sacrifice them or do something else. But again, they still will get exiled. So I think for the most part, you still want to keep some of the creatures that you will get or whatnot, or get in there with some of the creatures that you'll get. Because again, it's one of those things where you're not going to get anything off this otherwise. It's like, what's the point in stealing other people's stuff? Like, you want to use it for what you can do with it. Like, certainly, yeah, mana dorks and whatnot, you won't worry about because you're just like, oh, okay, cool, I keep them for now and I've got extra mana. Thanks so much. But, other than that, there's just no point in not attacking or not sacrificing them. So, eventually they're gonna go away. So you might as well find ways to keep killing their stuff so you can keep getting more stuff and whatnot. So I purely see this either as a fixed Tergrid deck, basically on its own, going into a Tergrid deck maybe, because again, this sort of helps you do your Tergrid thing even more, sort of, a little bit. But I don't think it's actually good enough for Tergrid, because the thing is, you only get those things for one turn or whatever. You do exile some stuff, which is kind of nice. And if you get mana dorks and whatnot, things like that, it wouldn't be too bad. So there are circumstances where you would want it in that deck, but I don't know whether there's enough. But I don't really see any other decks really wanting it. Maybe if you really want some graveyard hate, it's fine, and then you get to steal your opponent's stuff for a turn, that's fine. But I don't think it's that amazingly good that you would run it in too many decks like that. It just doesn't really do enough, I don't think. As its own thing, again, I don't think it's going to be as good picked up by many people as a backup Tergrid deck or whatever, because Tergrid exists. So until they ban it or whatever, it's just no one's really going to play this unless somebody's like, oh, I want to play fair Tergrid or whatever, and no one wants to play fair Tergrid. Come on, that's why you're playing Tergrid, or that's why that's so good. It's just oh well, it's busted. Alright, moving on. Jadar, Ghoul Caller of Neflar. 2 mana 1/1. At the beginning of your end step, if you control no creatures with Decayed, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. So again, this is kind of a standard like base card seemingly to me, because sure, it's kind of 3 power for 2, but that's very small. You've really got to find ways, I think, with this commander. It's kind of like Ophiomancer, I think. You really want to find ways to sack those zombies or do something with those zombies, so that you can keep getting a decayed zombie every turn, so that you can keep sacking it to keep, making zombies, to keep sacking it to making zombies, blah blah blah. So you've got to find ways that every single turn that you can sacrifice these zombies, get another zombie, sack it, get some inherent value, draw cards, whatnot, make mana, gain life, whatever, or make other tokens. Maybe you can attack with them, like if you've got free sacrifice outlets, maybe that's a good way to go about some of that. Or if other creatures, say, as an additional cost to cast it, you've got to sacrifice a creature, things like that. Maybe those are probably pretty good with this, because then, like, every turn you just don't really lose what you had. You just kind of like, oh, well, doesn't really matter. Like, I've still got the token. Kind of, it didn't get to attack or didn't really get to do anything. If I've got Blood Artist style or whatnot effects and things like that, you're just pinging everyone for 1 life, and then you're gaining life and whatnot, all of that sort of good stuff. Bastion of Remembrance, all that sort of good stuff. So I purely see this like if as a sacrifice or aristocrat style commander. There are a few really good aristocrats and sacrifice decks out there. Corvold and whatnot, all of those decks like that, Merrin and whatnot, Muldrotha maybe, decks like that, where if your main game plan is to sacrifice stuff, is to utilize some of these extra bodies that you've got to drain people's lives, aristocrat style, things like this, that you can get inherent advantage off of it. It's an okay commander, but I think there's just better, so I think it's probably going to go mostly in the 99 of other sacrifice decks, because it is only 1 color, but maybe some people want to use it like in certain decks, because it's just like, this seems like whatever, this is the main card that most of my other cards are built around. I don't know, it just doesn't seem like it's the card that I would go, wow, my deck is really built around this. Like, it can be built around this, like, to a degree, but again, most of the stuff will work with most commanders anyway and whatnot, so it just doesn't seem like it will do a lot. So I don't know, it's fine probably, but again, it's just a 1/1, so you've really got to find ways to protect it as well. So yeah, I don't know, there's lots of little ifs and buts and maybes and whatnot, and it just sort of, yeah, I don't know what you would do with it. Alright, next, Jaren Corrupted Bishop, 3 mana, 2/3. When he enters the battlefield or another non-token human we control dies, we lose 1 life and we create a 1/1 human creature token. Pay 2. Target human you control gains lifelink until end of turn. At the beginning of your end step, if you have exactly 13 life, you may pay 4 and double black to transform him, and then you transform it into Ormondal the Conqueror, a flying trample, life-linking 6/6, which you can sacrifice a creature to draw a card. This is probably a very interesting commander. It does a lot of different stuff. You just like play him, you make a 1/1, so he's kind of a 3/4, and whatnot. You do lose a life, which helps you slowly get towards like 13. if you want to flip him, this is another really weird commander. Like, do you run like all the Triskaidekaphobia or Triskaidekaphile style cards? I don't know. It's so weird to try to flip this thing, and the flip side is quite good, but I don't know whether you need it. I'm not sure. It's tough to evaluate this card. But is it a sacrifice commander? Not really. I think the main thing about this commander might be the fact that it's actually a Voltron commander. This is a really weird commander where you want to get to 13 life, I think, and then you want to flip it and turn it into a 6/6 that somehow you can find a way to kill your opponents with this, with your commander. Maybe, I don't know, but it's got some sacrifice style synergies to it. So it's just an oddball commander. Like, if I was to build, like, this seems like a cool commander. This seems like an incredibly cool commander. Like, because it's just like so oddball. It's at least very specific about what you kind of want to do. Maybe you don't care about the backside of this, and maybe you just like, I don't know, I'm not going to focus on getting to the 13 life because I'll start at 40 anyway, so it's not going to easily happen. But I'm just like going to, find ways to sacrifice things, make free 1/1s from sacrificing my stuff and whatnot. I don't really think target human gains lifelink is that relevant. Maybe it will be once in a blue moon. Maybe this guy can gain you a couple life when he has to block or whatnot, things like that. But you just look at it like, oh, okay, cool. If I somehow, at some point down the road, get to exactly 13 life and I happen to have 6 mana open, maybe I can flip it. And you can flip it at any time, so you can flip it as a blocker and whatnot. So that can be fine, especially to protect you. It's probably okay. But again, like, it's an interesting, like, sort of sack or sort of value, sort of aristocrat style commander that I think, it's not the best commander. And, maybe that doesn't matter. Again, like, if you open this in a pack and you just go, dude, I want to build around this, then yeah, and that's the same for every one of these cards. Like, if anyone opens these in a pack and goes, oh, wow, I pulled this, I'm going to build around it, whatever, that's all cool. But again, like, just the thing is, if you go, oh, okay, I'm looking on EDH Rec or I'm looking at the spoilers or whatever, oh, this card, what about this card if I build a deck around this card? Like, there's better commanders that you could be running and whatnot. So, then you really have to care about exactly what this is doing, trying to get to that 13 probably eventually in some way. And, like, the pinging you for losing life and making a 1/1 when your non-token stuff dies and whatnot, that seems fine as another way to get there. But again, it's sort of like very slow, arduous process, unless you can, like, flicker him, which I don't think there's many ways to flicker him in mono black. So again, I just think he's probably going to go into a lot of other aristocrat style decks where he can be better used as another effect to, help you make more fodder for your commander, like Corvold and decks like this, where you're like caring about sacrificing stuff. You can sacrifice stuff easily. And then once in a blue moon, again, if you ever get to the 13 life, you can flip him into a 6/6, and then you can just go to town with your big 6/6. So that seems probably the best place to put it. It's going to be really hard to get to exactly 13 life. So I think it's probably like a really against the odds sort of card that it ever flips. So, you mostly want to focus on the other stuff that it does. So in a shell that, by itself, I don't really see it. Like, it could work, yeah, sure. But are there better things? Like, we were just talking about Jadar. Jadar's pretty similar, but he does it for free and you don't lose life or whatnot. So, but you have to have that zombie sacked or whatnot. So, and you can't have any other decayed stuff. So that's a little bit of a build around, but at least it's very easy to build around. Whereas this, I don't know. It seems like you've got to put a little bit more work into it. So even like Jadar is a little bit better because it's a little bit easier for the most part to build around. But still, I think it's cool. I like this. Like, again, I said, this set I'm actually a little bit more hyped for than the D&D set. Next, Catalda Dawnhort Prime. 2 mana Selesnya human warlock, a 1/1 protection from werewolves. Humans you control have tap to add 1 mana of any color or any of this creature's colors, and you can pay 4 and white green to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So I feel like this is mostly a human style, tribal commander. And, that's probably pretty good. But again, like a lot of these cards, so many of these cards, just like all these cards, every single one of these cards is like 0 power basically, or 0 toughness, which is more important than power, really. Like, I would take this having 0 power and having 2 toughness more than anything, or I'd have more mana stapled onto it to cast it initially, and have that ability to put a +1/+1 counter on everything be less. 100%. Like, again, like, even though Shalai still has the same sort of ability for 6, so maybe that's as cheap as they want to make that ability. So that's a little bit, annoying. But, like, I definitely think this is a mono humans or, human tribal commander. If you really want to use this, again, it's very fragile. You need to find ways to protect it. So, yep, that's a big problem that you're going to have to, overcome. It does have protection for werewolves. How many werewolves are there in Commander? Not very many. Maybe there's a werewolf deck that's going to be in Commander, but again, no, there's probably not nearly enough werewolves for that to be that relevant. Eventually, you get to grow your team by 1. Like, I don't know. It's just like there's so many little things where this is just like, to a commander, it just doesn't like blow you off the page and go, oh wow, it does this. Oh my god, like, it's fine. Again, so it's one of those cards. It's like, oh, okay, I don't really see many people building this. I see people building Sagada humans or whatnot, the new Sagada, because Sagada's just dumb, because it's very powerful, it does a lot of stuff. Whereas, like, oh yeah, I can tap my humans to add mana, yeah, and that helps get you to that 6 mana ability, but again, she can tap for mana, so she's kind of a mana dog. So you could use this as just like a green-white ramp deck where you're just like trying to ramp out all your human stuff and just like ramp out more human stuff. I don't know. There's not that many humans that I can think of that are in these, like, in green, really. Like, there's a couple humans, but not a huge amount. Like, white has a few humans. Yeah, absolutely. But green mostly has beasts, cats, stuff like that. Green's all about creatures and wildlife. Green's not about, humans, like, really. There's druids and things, so there's not very many humans. Like, not that there's none, but there's not a lot that are in green's color pie, which is, might hurt this deck. If this was in another, set of colors, then I guess it wouldn't tap for mana. They'd be like, I don't know, do something else. I don't know, gain a life or something. I don't know, whatever, something weird or something like that or whatever. But still, I find that this could have been in other colours and probably would have been better. Like, there's just other human decks like Sagata, like that people have tried to build. So maybe this goes in that deck, and it just helps you out, make your humans into mana dorks if you need a lot of mana. It can be good on the early game to, because it is human, as I say. So it can be good in the early game to help ramp you out, help your other humans ramp you out, rather than having to have, too many other Llanowar elves, and you just like run all the, nature's laws and 3 visits and whatnot to, ramp in other ways, like green does have, and then you've got, Sagata or whatever, whoever is actually piloting the deck. So again, I just think it's not amazing. Liard, now, Disciple of the Drown Yard, 5 mana, 3/4. Spells can't be countered, which is very important. Each instant sorcery card in your graveyard has flashback. The flashback cost is equal to that card's CMC or mana value. So, this is a very interesting commander because it says spells, not your spells, not Steve's spells, not Andrew's spells or whatever. All spells. So no spells can be counted. Not you can't run. Basically, it's saying you can't run counter spells. Well, you can run counter spells, but counter spells while this is out don't do anything, basically. So if you were running a whole bunch of counter spells with this commander, you can't flash the back. Basically, because, well, you can, but it's a waste of time because spells can't be counted. So that means that nothing's getting counted. So just every blue deck is now shut off from counter spells. And probably every deck that has any number of counter spells, which is a very small number in comparison to blue. But most blue decks are shut off from all their counter spells. So, it's weird to think about what you would do with this. This does seem fine, and I don't really care that it has any power whatsoever. As long as it has some toughness and can survive, that's all I think I care about with this commander. This is an interesting one where you want to put cards into your graveyard that don't have flashback, that you can flashback and get additional value out of. There are a few other blue cards that care about having stuff in your graveyard or using stuff in your graveyard. There's certainly some blue spell stuff that would fit well with this because it's instant sorceries. This definitely can go into a lot of instant and sorcery decks, but not if you're running a whole lot of counter spells. Like if you're running a few, then sure, fine. But you don't want to be running that many of them because, again, there's not really any point in trying to flash them back because they basically just don't do anything while this is on the battlefield. So it's one of those things. It's just like, oh, okay, you want to run things like True Polymorph and things like that or whatever, so that gets rid of, creatures and whatnot or whatever. Planeswalkers and other things are going to be harder. So you've got to run a lot of bounce spells and bounce effects, whatnot, with this card to get rid of things while they're on the stack or exile them and whatnot. There are some other things that you can build around it, which sounds like a cool idea. But is this another one of those commanders where is it as good as like Talrand is? And that's hard. Like, you could run Talrand in this deck, and Talrand is going to go crazy in this deck. But you could run this in a Talrand deck, and this thing's just going to make your Talrand again go crazy, because this gives you access to your entire graveyard with the spells, which is just, how many Drakes did you make so far in this game? Oh, 40? Oh, just make another 40 Drakes. Go ahead. Especially in like mono blue decks, this is probably a lot better. Like, still, it's going to be good in like Is It and some other decks that are very spell slingery and whatnot as well, like Grixis and whatnot, things like this. But again, it's so much better in those blue decks because the only other like card that's like this is like Past in Flames, and that's in red. So, this, I think if you're mono blue, this is just now your, Past in Flames on a stick, and maybe this is better than Past in Flames in some decks because it's just like a body that can stick around and you can keep casting your instant sorcery throughout the rest of the game rather than just in one big burst. So you've really got to have a lot of mana behind yourself before you cast Past in Flames and whatnot, so that you can sort of storm off and whatnot. But this, I think, is sort of like, okay, I can, flash back my opt or whatever, and I can opt on somebody's turn and whatnot, and I can do this and I can do that and whatnot. So it does seem cool, like, again, because if it didn't have that text where it says spells can't be countered, then I wouldn't be as interested in this personally or whatnot, or I wouldn't think it was that cool, because it would be just like, oh, okay, cool, you're just going to flash back all your counter spells and just going to run the counter spell, game that everyone, plays and whatnot, and everything's going to get countered and everyone's going to be sad because they never get to resolve anything because the blue players got all access to their entire graveyard. Great. Like, this seems like a deck where you're going to play a lot of other different things, which is cool, and I think, it is its own deck. It's definitely a card that I would look at and go, wow, this is actually cool. This actually gives me a cool direction to build in, and whatnot. Something to, do with what I want to do, like, and then a lot of stuff that could be built into this deck. So this seems like a great commander. It's just figuring it out, like I'm sure we will figure it out, or someone will figure it out. I'd love to do a deck tech on it, actually, to a degree. But again, like, it can also just go in the 99 of lots of decks like Kess and whatnot. Any deck that is blue and you care about instant sorceries and you want to flash them back from your graveyard, sure, you might think that this is a creature in my spell deck, but it might be worth it. That's the thing. Like, some of these cards that are a spell that you're not mainly caring about, like Goblin Electromancer and some of those other cards, make it into the list just because they're so good at what they do that it's hard to replace them or justify replacing them or putting something else in there, because they're just so good at doing something very specific and helping you out with the entire game plan of your deck. So this seems like a great commander. Hey, we've got Lisa, Forgotten Angel. She's back. She's back. Alright, Lisa, Forgotten Archangel. 2 double white and a black 4/5. Flying and lifelink. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, return that card to the battlefield from the to hand. That card to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. Sorry, that was worded so weirdly. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. So your stuff comes back to your hand, your opponent's stuff goes to exile. So this is a very good Reanimator style commander. I really like this commander. This gives you a lot of stuff you can potentially do, because you can just like play all the mean sort of cards, I guess, like whatever that's called now, I can't think of his name, but like Fleshbag Marauder style effects, where you just make each opponent sacrifice their stuff. So it's kind of another Turgid, I guess, as well, where you just like exile your opponent's stuff essentially, and like, if you make your stuff die, it comes back to your hand, so then you can just like make your opponent sacrifice stuff and exile their stuff, things like that. So it doesn't let you play their cards or whatnot, but you can certainly put some of those cards to say you can play your opponent's creatures and whatnot. Like we were just talking about one of the ones earlier, you can choose the replacement effect. So I think this is a better commander than the one we were talking about earlier, which was Giza, because this actually, like, it gives you the main, like, play point for what your deck is doing. Like, now your creatures come back to your hand, and then when Giza is out, maybe you can get your opponent's creatures onto your side and whatnot. So this seems like a better commander than that. Like 4/5 flying lifelink seems fine too. Like, I don't think this is Voltron again, but just getting in there with your commander every now and again just to gain some life, it's fine. And sometimes you need to like get in there at somebody who's just like gaining ridiculous amounts of life and whatnot, and the only way to get rid of them is commander damage. So this could be another fine little thing. You know, it's not a thing you would normally do, but fine. And again, you can play that aristocrat style deck. The thing is, there's so many aristocrats sort of style like commanders, but this one does give you a very interesting like semi build around. You want these things that will kill your opponent's stuff but will also sacrifice themselves when they die, or things that you sacrifice to kill your opponent's stuff or to blow up your opponent's stuff, like artifacts and enchantments especially. I don't think there's a white caustic caterpillar, but I'm not sure. Maybe there is and I'm not like aware of it. But if there's any effects that are like that, those are the effects that you 100% want for a deck like this. And just anything like, you know, you sacrifice your Knight of the White Orchid or whatever. You get it back to your hand, and then you can play your Knight of the White Orchid again, or whatever, Loyal Warhound, whatever. You know, things like this, and just like go to town with a lot of these ETB creatures and whatnot, and basically rebuy them, you know, and then you don't even really care. Like, if your opponent's stuff dies, it dies, you don't really care, like, because it exiles. So, you know, it can be a real hoser for some decks where it's just like, this is so good, you know. Is it as good as the other Lisa? It's hard to say, you know. The other Lisa just stopped people playing spells pretty much, but that was kind of unfun to a degree or whatever. But this doesn't really do that. I think this is a much fairer and more interesting commander in a way, because at least you've got to build around doing something rather than just like, oh, you play a spell, you take 2 damage, you play a spell, you take 2 damage or whatnot. And then you just hit with your commander and gain all that life back, so it doesn't matter if you lose life, you know, and whatnot. So I think this is a cooler commander. It might gain some hate because, again, you're going to exile your opponent's stuff. Like, it doesn't matter if you're stealing it, no one wants this stuff to be exiled. And if it comes to being like the deck is mostly like Fleshbag Marauders and whatnot, where, you know, you're just clearing the board every single turn of all your opponent's stuff, and they just don't really get a foothold ever and never really get to play the game, and they're just watching you play solitaire, it's kind of like, well, that's not a very interesting and fun, you know, game for most people to play. So, yeah, there might be reasons why that happens, but again, you know, it does seem quite cool, and again, this is a top commander that I think a lot of people will play. Next, Ludwig, Necro Genius, 2 mana, Demir, 2/3. Whenever Ludwig enters the battlefield or attacks, mill a card. So that's interesting. X, blue, black. Exile X creature cards from your graveyard. Transform Ludwig. X can't be 0, activate only as a sorcery. And then he transforms into Ludwig Olgark, Ludwig's Hubris, a 4/4. Has this creature transforms, it becomes a copy of the creature card, exile with it, except it's still got its original name. It's a 4/4. It's a legendary blue and black zombie, in addition to its other types and colors. You put a number of +1/+1 counters on it, equal to the number of creature cards exiled with it. So I was like debating again, like this could be a Voltron commander because like you want to mill, like, and you want to attack with the front side, so you're getting in with this 2/3 that's probably not going to happen very much. Again, like a lot of this set is 2/3s and whatnot, these smaller creatures. Is this a CDH commander just because of that? No, I don't think so. I don't think its ability is nearly powerful enough or whatnot for that format. Maybe if you're just like a blue-black deck and you just want a commander and you don't really care about it and it's just there, sure, whatever. Maybe fine. But again, you get this out and you eventually flip it. You've got a 4/4 that gets a whole bunch of +1 counters because you're milling a whole bunch of stuff. If you can flicker it, it's better because, again, then you don't have to worry about getting into combat and whatnot, risking it because it's only a 2/3, unless you can find a lot of things to give it, like, not vigilant, unblockability, things like that, evasion, different things. So that would be okay. Again, maybe because it's kind of like the main thing is this thing, and it seems like the main payoff was from your commander. But it doesn't have the triggers on the back, so it's just kind of like a 4/4 that gets really big. But then again, it's really big now, so it's kind of like, well, it's still my commander, and I can still hit people. So maybe it would be worth it to be looking at it as a Voltron commander. So that's tough to me. But yeah, otherwise, there's some things that you could do with it, but it's one of those interesting things where you're already paying 4 mana +1, or at least +1, so you're already paying 5 mana to exile a card and make this a copy of that card. So unless you're milling really good things, I don't see it. I don't know, that just doesn't seem like that great, because unless you've got really good control over the top card of your library and you know what you're going to mill, you're just going to mill something bad, and then it's not like you get the ETB triggers or anything like that. You only get attack triggers or combat triggers or dice triggers or other things like that. So I don't really know what you're going to do with that when you do exile something. If you exile more than one thing, then it gets more counters, but that's even more mana to make it, bigger and bigger and bigger and whatnot. So I don't know. Maybe the best way is to not worry about the back and just if it ever flips, it flips or whatever, and maybe I'll have the mana one day or whatever to flip it. But, mostly just running all these equipment that make it difficult to block and whatnot. And eventually, I'm going to mill enough things, or somebody's going to try to kill it and whatnot. But then again, it's only as a sorcery, so that's tough. You've got to make the decision to flip it without, knowing if somebody's going to exile it or kill it or whatnot. But you can usually tell if somebody's going to kill it or if somebody's going to wrath or whatnot. But again, I don't know whether it makes that much difference, because it's kind of like, well, everything gets destroyed anyway, so did it really matter that you paid all that mana? If it was Blasphemous Act, then maybe it does, but otherwise, I just don't think so. I don't know. There's just too many little things here. For itself, I don't see anything. It's not a rogue or anything, so I don't see this finding its way. And it's not evasive or anything like that on its front. And it's so much work to get it on its back, and then even then it's not evasive, so you've got to really run the evasive creatures in the deck to make this evasive and whatnot, and things like that. So it's tough to see what this commander does by itself. Maybe you want to run a lot of the same sort of cards as the ninjutsu style deck, but I don't think so. I don't think this finds its way into a ninjutsu deck. Like I said, I don't think it does enough for those decks. It's not evasive, it's not a really big spell that you can kill people with off the top and things like this. So I just don't see that it's worth it in that deck. It could be an interesting commander, but I don't know. It's just a lot of work to seemingly not get very much. And whatever his name is from Ravnica, Lazav or whatever, is basically the same thing as this, but a lot better, really. and whatnot. So I don't know, if you want to do this janky like build around or whatnot, where you can turn this on and turn it into a 4/4 that has all these evasions and whatnot, or has different things. Like if you can find a way to give it infect and things like that, then it might start becoming like a legit thing that you're like, okay, this seems like a thing that works pretty well and that does what it does, and then it'll kill people, because you've always got to find those ways to actually like close out the game or whatnot. So yeah, but again, I don't know. It seems interesting at least. Old Stick Fingers X and Green Black Legendary Horror. When you cast a spell, you reveal cards from the top of your library to you reveal X creature cards. Put all creature cards reveal this way into your graveyard. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And his power and toughness are equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So now you've got to pay command tax as well on this. So I believe that doesn't add to the X, as it were, because you're not paying that into X, you're paying that into command tax. But this is still like kind of like Stitch's supplier or whatnot, or whatever it's called, the other one, the 2-mana one, I can't remember his name. But it's for creatures, but it's also just like a big threat. But the problem with this is, what if somebody nukes your graveyard? Because it's a star, so, as soon as your graveyard's gone, this thing goes too. So you've really got to find ways to protect your graveyard and this. So is this another Voltron commander? I don't know. Maybe this is just like a Dredge style commander, or whatnot, or a self-mill style commander. This would go well in a lot of other commander decks, but I don't know. This is hard to like point a finger and say, well, this is what you do with it. Mostly, I think it is just a self-mill, Dredge, whatever style commander, where you want to put things into the graveyard. Maybe you'll get this thing in there. Maybe you'll get some commander damage off on someone or whatnot, things like this, but I wouldn't rely on it. I'd prefer that, it, because again, it's pretty fragile, really, of a strategy for the most part. So I prefer to think about it like it's a graveyard matters deck or whatnot. This would go so well in like Merrin decks and whatnot, because then, if it dies itself, it doesn't really matter because you can get it back with Merrin. You're not casting it, but still, like, if you get it back to your hand, it might be alright. Then you can cast it for whatever you want, and whatnot, things like that. Keep milling yourself, keep getting more stuff in your graveyard, keep getting advantage, more dropper, things like that. Pretty good in those decks. And if your graveyard gets nuked, well, this is still going to be in your graveyard, so maybe it's a backup card that can help you get back in the game after your graveyard has been nuked. So that's probably pretty good for those decks, because that's one of the biggest things that they have problems with, is like, oh, my graveyard got nuked, now I don't do anything for about 7 or 8 turns. Oh, look, the game's over, because we're already 6 or 7 turns in by the time it got dealt with. So yeah, it's one of those things. It's just like, if you're in a graveyard deck, I think this is a better card, way better card in your 99, because again, you can just put it into your deck, mill yourself for however much you want, get as much stuff in your graveyard as you need, and it just basically sort of pseudo-tutors the cards from the top of your deck, rather than, whatever, you hoping to hit so many cards. It's not just like the top X cards of your deck, it's the top X creatures of your deck, essentially. So you're always going to get the gas that your creature deck that cares about the graveyard needs, rather than just like some random lands or instant or sorceries or some, utility artifacts or enchantments that happen to be in your deck because, you just so happen to need them for what your strategy's doing. But again, I don't see it as its own thing. Maybe it can be, but I don't see it being a top commander. I see it just being a card that a lot of people will run in like Madrotha and Naren. Next, Rem Carlos Stewart Slayer. 3 mana, 2/3, flying and haste. If a spell would deal damage to you or another permanent you control, prevent that damage. If a spell would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls that deals that much damage +1. So it's kind of like a Torbran style effect, but it's in Boros and it flies and has haste. So essentially it is a 3 power flyer rather, because it deals 1 extra damage to the opponent that it'll hit, or deals 1 extra damage to the creature that it'll block or get blocked by or whatever. So that's all fine, but I definitely don't think this is Voltron or anything like that. It's interesting to think about what it is, because it's essentially just like Boros Burn, I guess, kind of. The thing you probably want to do with this is do all of those shenanigans, like Citadel of Pain and whatnot, all of these Punisher style effects. If an opponent does a thing, they take damage, and then they take 1 extra. There's not that much stuff in white that really helps you do that, though there are a couple of weird cards that do damage in white. But, white can be there for some of the support cards, like the removal and board wipes and some stuff like that. Even though, like I said, this video is still coming out, I think, white actually has some decent ramp. It doesn't have much card draw, but it's not like it has none now. If this had lifelink, there's that new lifelink card that basically draws your cards, but it doesn't have that, so I don't know about that. So it's one of those cards. Again, this is probably standard stats and standard costs and whatnot. So a lot of that stuff goes into it because it is mostly built for standard, but it's got our format in mind. I don't see any like Punisher or Burn style decks that contain this sort of color pairings and whatnot. So I definitely just think this is its own thing where you've definitely got to build around it. There's no other real commanders that are in any number of colors really. Maybe Breya or whatever. Or whatnot. Some things like that where you want to do, like if you ping things or whatnot, then maybe, but like there's very little. There's only a few commanders that don't do direct damage or whatnot. Kelsey the Plague is actually one of them, but most of the time you want him to have death touch, so dealing with an extra damage isn't really going to do much. All the Torroth effects are probably good with this and things like that. So there's definitely some good stuff that you can do with it. Dealing +1 damage with certain cards, probably not that worth it, but other cards, absolutely it's worth thinking about, because there's certain cards that you would go, I just wish this dealt 1 more damage every single time because it doesn't quite deal with what I need it to do. So I definitely think it's a cool commander that you basically are playing Boros Burn. Alright, next, Salar, the Vipers Fang. 4 mana, 3/4, 2 and double green. Other tapped creatures you control have Death Touch. Untapped creatures you control have Hexproof. Pay 1 and tap it to untap target creature or land you control. So I think that this is mostly going to be a ramp-based commander where sure you get Death Touch on your attacking creatures, sure you have Hexproof on your untapped stuff, so you protect your stuff, it protects it, and then it has Death Touch, which is kind of weird because it's already tapped, so it can't block or whatever. But, it's over the creature. But anyway, still, whatever. But if you've got guys, Cradle, Circle of Dreams Druid, cards like this, Nykthos, cards that produce extra mana and whatnot. This is a commander where you're just trying to ramp big stuff out. Could be a nice X-Spell style commander, though I don't think there's enough green X-Spells, but there might be maybe some. But there's also just a lot of big green stompy stuff. So another green stompy commander, I really don't see what else you could do with it. There are certain decks that do go good in, but it's also just like 4 mana and it doesn't really do that much. Yeah, your attacking creatures could have Death Touch, or your untapped stuff can have Hexproof, so it can provide you with some protection and some benefit, but you've really got to be able to untap with this, I think, to activate its full potential. As a commander, I don't know. As a commander, I don't know whether this is just like the best commander to like be playing green ramp stuff and then big stompy things, but it's a decent one. At least it's not like Elf Tribal where you just like gutted into that like tribe and it's just like, well, I'm not going to play Craterhoof because it's not a elf, or am I going to play Craterhoof because it's just a really good finisher, whatnot, because everyone runs Craterhoof and whatnot. This one, you don't have to care whether you're like, it's an elf tribal deck or whatnot, or get caught up in that fact that it seems to be an elf tribal deck or whatnot, or things like that. Because I think a lot of decks that just seem to do this thing where they make lots of mana happen to have a lot of elves. But again, you can not care about that. Look, the main plan of this deck is to cast big, stompy, things. Cast, Avenger of Zendikar, cast Craterhoof Behemoth, smash people in the face for, lethal damages and win. That's the main idea, and this just necessitates, ramping into the bigger and better and more powerful things. So I think this could be a very good deck like that, but is it like the best one? I don't know. It's still really quite good. So I do think that this will see quite a bit of play in a lot of decks if you are doing that same sort of like plan where you have lots of ways to get lots of mana and whatnot, or if you want to do that and cast big stompy things. So that seems like a great idea to me. Sounds fun. But anyway, next, Sigardia, Champion of Light. 1 green and a double white, 4/4, flying trample. Humans you control get +1/+1. Has the new Coven ability, so when it attacks, if you have 3 or more creatures with different powers, you look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a human card from a creature card from among them, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Like I said with the other card earlier, I think this is just a way better humans commander, because it's card advantage very easily, and it's a very evasive commander and can get in there, and it gives your humans a buff and whatnot, as opposed to just sort of like having them tap for mana. That's fine, but I think eventually you can get that +1 counters, but again, straight away, just giving your stuff +1 if you have anything on board, probably a lot better. You don't have to try to ramp it into anything. I think that other card can go well in this deck, but I think this is a better commander for it. So I would think that this is again another human tribal style deck that you can run a lot of humans in, and get some janky angel beats in there as well. But you do have to work around that Coven ability where you've got to make sure at least all your creatures have different powers. Even though it gives +1/+1, that's not going to matter as long as all your stuff has different powers. And, you can augment a lot of humans' power with a lot of other different effects and whatnot. So some equipment, whatnot, might be okay to help out with some of that. Boots probably is good because you want to get in there right away, start generating that card advantage. So yeah, I really think that this is another human commander. I don't think there's too many other applications for it in other commander decks. I think, maybe another Sigarda deck, maybe, but there's not that many green-based human decks, so I just think this is its own thing for the most part. Next, Slogurk, the Overslime. 3 mana, 3/3 trample. Whenever a land is put into your graveyard from anywhere, you put a +1 counter on him. You remove 3 counters from him. You can return it to its owner's hand. When it leaves the battlefield, return up to 3 target land cards from your graveyard to your hand. So it's kind of like Life from the Loam on a stick. And whatnot. So it's also kind of I'm about to say Sakura Tribe Elder. It's not what is not Oran Frostfang, what's it called? Whatever the Ramonac Excavator. But it doesn't let you play the lands from the graveyard, it gets them back to your hand. Kind of. But it's better comparison to a degree because it's doing this weird thing, but it's so weird to be thinking about what this actually does because it doesn't matter how you get the counters on there. I don't know whether this matters how many times you can return it to your hand, but you can only really return it once because it's when it leaves. So you can do that trick where you remove 3 counters to return it, but then you can remove 3 counters to return it infinitely. Because as long as you've got the counters on it, it doesn't matter how many times you want to do that. But then you only get the one trigger where it's like when you let it leave, you get to do the whole lands back to your hand thing. So you want ways to get lands into your graveyard consistently, a lot. Like milling them, discarding them. You want lots of lands in this deck. And you want lots of lands to do lots of things. So I think it's an interesting commander for Simic because they're doing all this land sort of stuff for the last few years. And this is a different way to take it, which is good. So, I don't like the same thing every single time, and no one does, I don't think. But it's one of those commanders that I don't know what the payoff is, or whatever. Do you run things that care more about lands going in and out of your graveyard, which is what I think you probably should do. So there are a couple of cards that are like that. Or should you just be like, I'm going to get lands back from my graveyard and be some sort of land dredge deck or whatnot, and then, get all your lands back from the graveyard and things like that. There are cards certainly that mill more lands and whatnot in the colours, so there are chances that you can find it as well. So I don't know, it's tough to figure out what you're actually doing with it, for the reason to return lands, or maybe you don't care. I don't know, this is just an okay blocker, maybe it gets in for commander damage, I don't know, there's just a lot of open-endedness to what you're actually going to do with those lands once you get them back into hand. Are you going to just discard them again to get more triggers on your other stuff and you don't really care what this thing's doing? And eventually you'll get the lands back to hand if you really, really need them, just so that you can get more lands to discard or get more lands to whatnot, loot away or whatever, and things like that. So I don't know, maybe that's where this goes. It's interesting to think about. It could be a really well built around commander because everyone goes, wow, I wonder what I can do with this. This seems like a great, interesting thing to fiddle with and try and figure out. So it's not bad. It's just kind of I kind of would like to see more specificity or something else, or just it have another ability somehow, some way, rather than getting counters. Because the counters on it don't really matter. I guess it does for its own ability, but again, you could find ways to put counters on it and whatnot in other ways. So I don't know. It's very interesting. Finally, we've got to our werewolf commander for the set. We've got one more card after this, but we've got to our werewolf, second last card, Toevalar, Dire Overlord, 3 mana, 3/3. Whenever a wolf or werewolf you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more wolves or werewolves, it becomes night. Then transform any number of human werewolves you control. Has day bound, so basically when it enters, it becomes day, so that you can transform it to night because it's got to be day first. Then when you do flip it, whenever a wolf or werewolf you control deals damage to a player, draw a card, and it's a 4/4 now. Target you can pay X and green red to give target wolf or werewolf plus X plus O and trample until end of turn. So, it can buff up a lot of your wolves one by one, but, it's really a good commander for werewolves to, when you hit, you draw. So it's basically a Toski in your command zone, which is absurdly good and can draw you a lot of cards, keep the werewolves flowing, keep the wolves flowing, so that you can hit people with more wolves and whatnot. You can survive wraths a little bit better because you're hitting people with your wolves and whatnot. 3 mana is small, and 3 power and 3 toughness is small. If you can flip it, 4/4, not too bad. Can get in there, and especially since you can pay that green red X and pump up your stuff. Yeah, this is definitely a go wide commander. You could definitely get in there for some Voltron beats sometimes, I think, but for the most part, you want to make lots of werewolves, put all the good werewolves in this deck, and just beat face with werewolves. So this is a great commander for if you want to build that werewolf deck. I know a lot of people have been hungering for it for many years, so it's a great commander and a great leader for that deck. But otherwise, I don't think I see it having much play elsewhere. It is literally the best werewolf commander, so the other werewolves commanders are going in this. This is the best one by far. It's better than the other ones. So yeah, this just doesn't see play anywhere else, I don't think, in any other decks. Almost last actually, because I've got one more other card that I've got to talk about, which is not properly in the set, but it is in the set, but we'll talk about it quickly. Vadrak Astral Archmage, 3 mana, 1/2. It's a 1 blue and a red. If it's neither night nor day, it becomes day as Vadrak enters the battlefield. Instant sorcery cards you cast cost X less to cast, where X is its power. Whenever days becomes night or night becomes day, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. There is very little +1/+1 counter synergy stuff in these colors, as like the Grixis decks show with the whatever it is, not daybound, whatever it's called, dethrone ability. So I don't see this having very many ways to put +1/+1 counters on itself. So it's just Goblin Electromancer as a legendary for the most part, because again, you're just mostly going to have 1 power or whatever on this guy. If you can augment its power, in other ways with enchantments and auras and equipment and things like that, then yeah, sure, again, it'll help you out more with your instant sorceries. But to be honest, I don't know whether this is that good. It probably is okay. Is it better than like the other options like Goblin Electromancer and the mono blue one, as far as like going into the 99 of other decks? Because like this isn't probably the best commander because there's not enough ways to get the counters on it, which is the main thing about it. Like you can still make it day or whatever when it enters, but there's not that many ways in blue-red to make it day-night or whatever. So I don't see that there's enough to build around this with. for that sort of strategy. So you've got to augment its power and toughness in other ways or whatever. So yeah, there's not much you can do with that, at least in my opinion. Like there's a little bit, but like is it too much work, or is it just good enough to be like your spells are one cheaper for 3 mana and it being a legendary in your command zone? Maybe, but I don't think you want that. You want the enabler or the payoff, or you want both, I think. Like, what's the payoff for this? Nothing. Like, yeah, so sure, it can help you cast your spells, but Mizzix is probably a whole lot better than this, so I don't see it beating that. Does it go in like decks like that? Maybe, sure, again. Like, but is it better than many of the other options? And like, how many other things like are you gonna run maybe that help buff it up to make it more worth it? I don't know, probably hardly any. So it won't really do that much. It'll just be another Goblin and Electromage. Maybe that's fine for decks, but I just don't think it's good enough. I don't really think. If it just had a static ability of, your spells cost 2 less to cast or whatnot, then I think it'd be just a lot better, because it just like, yeah, sure, it's variable and you can make it more, but the fact that its ability, its main ability is so hard to activate means that you've got to run so many support pieces for this otherwise to get around the fact that its ability doesn't really work for the colors that you're in, that it's probably just not worth it. So I don't really think it's that interesting. Alright, there's one other card from the set which is a commander legal card which is not legal in the standard set, which is this one, Lydell Cheerful Tormentor. It's available only in collector's boosters and in set boosters, but as I said, it will be legal in commander, but it's available nowhere else. So it's a 4 mana Grixis commander. So 1 blue, black, red, human warlock with death touch, 2/4. Lydell Cheerful Tormentor. Whenever a curse is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, return it to the battlefield attached to you at the beginning of the next end step. So it kind of has that ability like some of the gods from Amonkhet or whatever to help you get back your stuff, your curses in this case. But at the beginning of your upkeep, you may attach any curse that's attached to you to one of your opponents, and if you do, you draw 2 cards. So this is the curse commander. There's no other curse commander. I've seen some people try to build like Kenrith 5-color curses or Arden with some curses. Unfortunately, Arden is white, so Arden can't go in this deck. There's no other real Arden style effects. But you don't really need Arden or other effects that are like that, because this helps you out so much with like the fact that your curses will be destroyed by other players and whatnot. And eventually you're just like, dude, that person's almost dead, or they literally do die. So you need to move your curses from one player to another player, or you're just at that point where it's just like, is it worth me continually taxing this person? No, not really, because they're basically just dead. And they've basically done nothing for the whole game because they've had 20 curses on them. And this other player is like just going to town and going to the races, and I really need to deal with them. And the only way I can do that is with my curses. I don't know. It's tough to say that there's enough curses for this to a degree, but most of them are in these colors. So it's just like, yeah, sure, there probably is just enough. Is there any enchantment support in these colors? Barely any. That's the problem. Like, there is the curse that tutors other curses and whatnot. There's certainly other things that you can, like, gamble and things like that, and all the tutors that are in black. But there's not really that much support for enchantments in these colors. So I don't know how well this is going to go as a commander. So it's tough to just say this is going to be that good. but you've just got blue and black for card draw, so maybe you don't need that much synergy. But unfortunately, you might have to run some other cards that sort of, do other things. There's certainly the curse that actually does draw you cards, but still, it's not going to be enough to fill a deck and make your curse deck really function when you're trying to draw a whole bunch of cards. Yes, your commander gives you that upside of drawing 2 cards when you enchant someone. If you've got you've got a curse on you, which is good because it works with its own ability to return them attached to you at the beginning of the end step when they get destroyed or whatever. So, there are ways you can build around that. And again, you are in blue and black, so blue and black have some of the best card draw, like red has some amount of card draw too, and whatnot. And there are some other enchantments that maybe, you might want to just be mostly mono enchantments with this deck. You can run Bolus of Citadel and cards like that just because it's might as well. Where else am I going to get cards that, really help me out and be on theme with what I'm kind of doing? So, yeah, there's certainly a deck that, you can build with this, I think. How good it's going to be, I don't know. It's going to probably be a bit annoying to play against, but, that's what apparently everyone likes. Everyone likes to play the decks that, haha, I got you, and whatnot, and things like that, but whatever. That's the way it is. But anyway, that is definitely it for the set. And I'm glad we're done to a degree, but Crimson Vow's coming, so I can't lay back for too long. But certainly I've got more stuff coming very soon with the main set stuff here on the channel. And as I said, I'm doing them more in this sort of style where you can see me here and you can see the cards over here rather than, me having to go through the cards and copy and paste and put them into things and whatnot, because it's just a lot less work. But hopefully, and I think it's more interactive and whatnot, and sort of works a little bit better, makes a little bit more sense this way. Plus, you can actually see me down here. At least on the video, again, the podcast people, sorry, you probably can't see what's going on and whatnot, me waving here and whatnot. But anyway, guys, hope that you've enjoyed looking at me having a bit of a look at some of these cards from the new set. Certainly we'll be doing our upcoming videos, as said, for red, white, blue, black, green, and lands, colors and multicolor and whatnot, very soon in the next couple of days, next couple of weeks, and certainly spoilers for the commander decks will be coming out. Be doing our precon deck upgrades when they do come out and whatnot, and when we can get around to them. And I might do those in this format as well. So, let me know what you guys think about these cards. Which one are you most hoped for? Am I so wrong about any of these cards that, oh my god, it's the most amazing thing ever, and, it does this and I didn't realize, and it combos with this and I didn't realize and whatnot? I wouldn't know a lot of those sorts of things because I'm not one of those people that plays a lot of combos and whatnot and, plays CDH or anything like that, because I just don't find it very interesting. But whatever, let me know what you guys think, and if you know something that I don't know, hey, it's very helpful for me, and it might be helpful for somebody else who's looking through the comments. But anyway, hope you have enjoyed. See you next time. If you would like to further support the channel, you can go onto our Patreon. You can also get social with us on our Facebook. To follow all the updates, make sure you hit the like button. And on our Discord, to get into it, please leave a comment and I'll send you an invite. All links are in the description. Hey, you've just finished watching one of our videos. A bunch of other videos are popping up on your screen now for you to check out, so why not check them out? I hope you have enjoyed this video here today.